Samantha had always been the perfect wife, or so everyone believed. Married to Daniel for 7 years, their love seemed unshakable. They had built a beautiful life together, filled with laughter, late-night talks, and quiet Sunday mornings. But beneath the surface, Samantha felt a yearning she couldn't ignore. It all started innocently enough: texts that lingered a little too long, stolen glances across a crowded cafe, a brush of hands that sent shivers down her spine. Ethan, a charismatic and adventurous man she had met through work, made her feel alive in a way she hadn't in years. With Daniel, everything had become routine; with Ethan, every moment was electric. Their affair was a whirlwind of passion. Secret hotel rendezvous, late-night calls, and whispered confessions of love. Samantha convinced herself that no one would ever know, that she could balance the two lives, keeping her heart divided between the comfort of her marriage and the thrill of her affair. But Daniel wasn't a fool. He noticed the distant looks, the way she always kept her phone face down, the scent of a cologne that wasn't his. He didn't confront her right away. Instead, he played the long game, watching, waiting, gathering evidence. One evening, Samantha came home to find the dining table set for two, candles flickering softly. Daniel greeted her with a warm smile, pulling out her chair. "I wanted to surprise you," he said, pouring her a glass of wine. Guilt gnawed at her, but she forced a smile. "That's sweet." They talked, laughed, and for a moment, she felt like they were back in the early days of their love. But just as she was beginning to believe she could keep her secret, Daniel reached into his pocket and pulled out a small envelope. Her breath caught as she opened it, revealing a stack of photos, her and Ethan, hand in hand, lips locked, bodies tangled in passion. "I thought we had something real," Daniel said quietly, his voice steady but filled with pain. "But I guess I was wrong." Samantha's heart pounded. She wanted to deny it, to come up with a lie, but the evidence was undeniable. Tears welled in her eyes as she reached for his hand, but he pulled away. "I loved you, Sam. But I won't be the fool who stays." That night, as Daniel walked away, Samantha realized she had lost more than she had ever gained. The thrill of her affair had cost her the one thing she never thought she would lose: true love. And in the end, the woman who thought she would never get caught was left with nothing but regret. As the days passed, Samantha's life felt like it was crumbling in slow motion. Daniel's absence was a deafening silence in their once shared home. The bed felt empty, the house too quiet, and every corner of their life together seemed to mock her with memories of what she had lost. She had thought she could play both sides, but now she was faced with the painful truth that both worlds had shattered. Ethan, too, had become distant. After the affair was exposed, he stopped returning her calls and texts. The passion that had once felt so freeing now seemed shallow and empty. Samantha tried to reach out, to salvage whatever was left, but Ethan had already moved on, too. He had been a thrilling escape, but never someone who was truly there for her. Days turned into weeks, and Samantha found herself alone with her thoughts, replaying the past, wondering where everything had gone wrong. There was no one to blame but herself. Her mind wandered back to the days when Daniel would surprise her with thoughtful gestures, flowers after a long day of work, a surprise date night when things felt mundane. He had loved her deeply, and she had thrown it all away for a fleeting romance. One night, after weeks of introspection, Samantha found herself sitting at a cafe alone. The weight of her decisions pressed on her shoulders, and she couldn't shake the feeling of emptiness. It was then that she saw a familiar face: Daniel, sitting at a table across the room, his eyes meeting hers for the briefest of moments. For a second, it felt as if time had stopped. She stood up instinctively, her heart racing. But before she could make a move, Daniel was already standing and walking out of the cafe. She hesitated, but something deep inside urged her to follow him. She had to talk to him, to apologize for everything. She caught up to him just outside the cafe, her voice shaking as she called his name. "Daniel, wait." He turned, and the look in his eyes was colder than she had ever seen. But beneath the coldness, she could see the pain, the anger, and something else, an unspoken forgiveness that lingered in the air between them. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I was selfish. I was afraid of losing myself, of growing old and forgetting who I was. I made a mistake, Daniel. I love you. I always have. I never meant to hurt you." He stood there, silent for a long moment, studying her face. The wind rustled through the trees around them, and for a brief moment, Samantha thought he might turn and walk away. But then, Daniel did something she didn't expect. He stepped closer, his expression softening. I know you didn't mean to hurt me, Sam. But love is built on trust. And you broke mine. Tears welled up in her eyes as she nodded, knowing that words could never undo the damage she had caused. But Daniel's gaze never wavered, and in that moment, she saw the man she had once loved deeply, the man who had loved her despite everything. The realization hit her hard. Her affair hadn't just betrayed him, it had betrayed herself. I don't expect you to forgive me, she said quietly. But if there's any chance at all, I'll spend the rest of my life proving that I can be the woman you once believed in. Daniel took a deep breath and then, for the first time in what felt like an eternity, smiled, a sad, bittersweet smile. I don't know if I can trust you again, he said softly. But maybe, just maybe, you can start by trusting yourself. And with that, he turned and walked away, leaving her standing in the fading light, her heart heavy with regret, but also with the faintest glimmer of hope, a hope that, perhaps, someday, trust could be rebuilt. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but the journey toward healing had to begin somewhere. Samantha knew that rebuilding what they had would take time, if it was even possible. But in that moment, she realized that love was not just about passion or excitement. It was about commitment, respect, and honesty, the things she had neglected when she thought she could have it all. She vowed then and there to spend the rest of her life seeking redemption, not from Daniel, but from herself.